entire time live. And I will send a follow-up email that'll have the links to the exam and also the evaluation so that you can get your credits. Thanks, Catherine.
Of course. And as you likely just heard, this webinar is being recorded. We will not be sharing slides, but you will be welcome to go back and view this if you would like. Okay, without further ado, I am very thrilled to introduce a colleague and a dear friend, Deborah Grassman. Few people have been with 10,000 dying veterans, however, one VA hospice nurse has. What Deborah Grassman has witnessed is providing lessons for the rest of the world. The lessons are about a process for attaining personal peace, and ironically, these lessons have come from people who were trained for war. She discovered a phenomenon that has become identified as soul injury. As a result, she founded a nonprofit organization called Opus Peace to bring the soul injury message to others. A psychiatric nurse practitioner, Deborah is the author of many books, including Peace at Last and The Hero Within. She's also been a contributing author of 4 textbooks, has, I know, more than 25 published articles, and there are 5 documentary films featuring her work, as well as, last but not least, providing a TED Talk on soul injury. She is the director of the Opus Peace Institute, where leaders are trained to provide programs that respond to soul injuries. I know throughout the webinar, Angie will be sharing more resources and links for soul injury. And as a reminder, we do have a specific Opus Peace resources page on the We Honor Veterans website. So don't forget to visit both of those. And I'm now very happy to turn it over to you, Deborah.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you, NHPCO and the We Honor Veterans program for providing this opportunity to talk not only about veterans a bit, but primarily today about caregivers, not only caregivers of veterans, but really we're going to focus on our own nurturing the nurturer, so to speak. And much of what we're going to be doing again has come from my 30 years of experience dealing with families who are caring for dying veterans. So what I would start off is saying that caregiving is hard. Caregiving can wear you down. And whether you are a professional healthcare provider taking care of patients or a personal caregiver of people in your family, there's some things we can talk about that might help you withstand the rigors of caregiving. Now, this lesson is going to focus on professional caregiving, but personal caregivers are going to discover that in many ways, the same issues apply to them as well. So we're going to start today by doing a crash course about the brain and how stress impacts it. This book, The Body Keeps the Score, forms the basis for what we're going to talk about. It's research-based, it's comprehensive, and it includes holistic interventions. It's written by Bessel van der Kolk, a physician psychiatrist. He has the Center for Trauma in Boston, and he's considered by many to be one of the leading authorities on PTSD and techniques for rewiring the brain. Now, this idea that the body keeps the score is not new. Think about lie detector tests. The whole basis for lie detectors is that you can say one thing, but if it's not true, the lie will register in your body. Think about hypnosis. Your unconscious does not sleep. It registers what's going on, whether you know it or not. And it is well known that if verbal messages don't match nonverbal messages, the body language is more likely telling the truth. Now, imaging technology now gives us the means to track how acute and chronic stress changes the brain. And now we know the brain can be changed, and that's called neuroplasticity. New so-called software can be installed so that our brain can learn to change stress responses. Now, you may think you only have one brain, but you actually have 3. We have a primitive survival brain which acts instinctively. The primitive brain is active at birth. Think of a baby's brain, which regulates what it needs to survive. eating, breathing, heart rate, peeing, pooping, those kinds of things. The next part of the brain to develop is the emotional brain, or the limbic system, that registers emotions. It also surveys the environment for dangers. It maps the world as good, bad, or neutral, but it has a bias toward the bad, toward the negative. Now, like the primitive brain, it also is geared toward survival. And this is the part of the brain where trauma imprints. The rational brain is the last layer of the human brain to develop. This frontal cortex allows us to bond to and relate with others. It's the logical part of the brain that reflects, analyzes, and problem solves. Now, maturation of our brain continues through these 3 stages until it's fully developed in our mid-20s. Anybody have teenagers? Do they sometimes make bad decisions? There's a reason. Their frontal cortex has not yet matured to make rational decisions. The brain is still in that survival, live in the moment mode. Now, not only do you have 3 brains, but you also have what scientists call a brain in your gut. An article in the Johns Hopkins newsletter says this: if you've ever gone with your gut to make a decision, you're likely getting signals from an unexpected source, your second brain. Hidden in the walls of the digestive system, this brain in your gut is revolutionizing medicine's understanding of the links between digestion, mood, health, and even the way you think. Scientists call this little brain the enteric nervous system. And the enteric nervous system has more than 100 million nerve cells lining your GI tract. All right, so that's the brain. Let's talk briefly now about stress. In the midbrain is a special part of the brain whose job it is to keep you safe, to keep you out of dangers. And it registers threats and makes sure that threats get imprinted so that even anticipated threats will not harm you. And that part of the brain is called the amygdala. And it activates automatically without your conscious control. It causes you to fight, flight, or freeze when a stressor arises. Now, people get triggered. And in the literature, this is called the amygdala hijack. It's as if the amygdala has hijacked the brain and says, stop what you're doing and do what I want you to do. We now know that there are ways to develop a better relationship with the amygdala so that it loses its power to hijack. And van der Kolk says that the way to do that is through toning down the amygdala by helping it know that the body is safe. And at Opus Peace, that's what our self-help tools are designed to help with. Now, it's easy to see how the brain is changed after an acute traumatic event. For example, it's easy to see that people who go to war come back changed. They come back not the same person. But what you may not realize is that trauma can be acquired gradually. And what's important for you to know is whether your brain reaction to stress is sudden or the same. And the outcome often looks the same. What you need to realize is that chronic, unrelenting stress can accumulate, coalescing into a slow bleed that turns the distress switch to the on position, just like sudden trauma does. And that can lead to post-traumatic stress.
Now, the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, identifies certain criteria to make the diagnosis. These are easily available online, but let me briefly review them. First is exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence in at least one of the following ways: direct experience, in-person witnessing of others being traumatized, learning about a loved one's traumatic event. Now, what I want you to make note of is that this third category of learning about trauma from someone else can also cause PTSD. In the literature, it's called secondary trauma. And healthcare workers who are repeatedly exposed to taking care of the sick or the injured or the dying are at risk. Counselors who repeatedly listen to stories of loss and trauma are also at risk for secondary traumatic stress disorder. Now, the literature defines secondary traumatic stress disorder as caregivers who are caring for others with compassion and empathy experience the stressful event, seeing it through the storyteller's eyes, and their body responds as if it's happened to them. And as a result of this exposure, the person has at least one intrusive symptom that began after the trauma. And you see those listed up here. Now, if you are repeatedly bombarded with stressors, what would you do? Well, you would try to avoid the distress. Commonly, you will see numbing behaviors, not just drugs or alcohol, but things like workaholism, sports addictions, job hopping, relationship hopping. And understandably, avoiding distress causes adverse changes in cognition and mood. And you see several different ways that this can manifest itself. Now, the one I want you to pay attention to is feelings of detachment or estrangement from others, because you will commonly see this with people who are burned out. An additional stressor just sort of makes them disappear. Now, the DSM calls this psychic numbing or emotional anesthesia. Now, the last criteria is marked reactivity associated with the trauma. And again, you see several listed up here. These symptoms must last more than 1 month and cause significant impairment in functioning in order to qualify for the diagnosis. Do you witness loss, hardship, or death on a regular basis? Do you experience unrelenting demands on your time that leaves you drained and unfulfilled? And what about the pandemic? Talk about loss, hardship, and unrelenting demands. These stressors can be sources of distress, and your body reacts to these stressors, whether you want it to or not. The key is developing awareness about how your body is reacting. Now, one research study of hospice nurses found that 78% of them had secondary traumatic stress disorder. And you can see on your screen some of the most common symptoms. So this is no small matter. The effects of stress hormones spike quickly to even small stimuli and take a longer time to return to normal levels. This is due to the effect of adrenaline and cortisol. And cortisol stays in your system a long time after the adrenaline rush. So now things bother you and set you off that don't usually bother you. Feelings are hurt much more easily. Walls go up much more quickly. And everyone is walking on eggshells around you. Now, the reason that this happens is because the brain's filter system is now dramatically altered because the amygdala is now in charge. So you can't take in good stimuli and you focus on bad stimuli. So people tend to be a bit suspicious, a bit paranoid. Now, as a result, energy is spent trying to suppress inner chaos, and the brain is less capable of spontaneous, present moment engagement. Coping becomes using the higher brain to numb out, deny. You deny what that lower brain is feeling, or having the lower brain actually act out the feelings, often alternating between the two. Now, no matter if you acquire your stressed out brain suddenly or slowly, the result is your brain is changed. You stop being curious about the world and instead you become scared of it. You become wary of any further demands. You lose your self-confidence. Your imagination is blunted. You can't even imagine a new future for yourself. And this leads to a sense of hopelessness.
Now, some of you may be familiar with the self-care inventory tool that ELNIC uses for hospice training. The first section has questions about physical self-care, and we're going to use a poll for you to answer each of the questions. Now, each question is going to come up on your screen, and then you will answer it with either one answer is often, sometimes, rarely, or are you kidding? It never even crossed my mind. So I also want you to know as you're answering this poll that the poll is anonymous. The polling company does not tell us how anyone answers. It will only give us a collective score that will show up on your screen for all of us to share. So here's the question in a poll for you to answer. You can have the first polling question. There we go. Take a moment to consider the frequency with which you do the following acts of self-care. Eat regularly. In other words, no skipping meals. How would you answer that? Often, sometimes, rarely, or essentially never. How often do you eat regularly and without skipping meals? Okay. I'm going to see the results.
Yep.
All right, so you can see that there. So commonly, people that looks like are eating regularly. Well, that sounds good. All right, next question. What about eating healthfully? Do you often eat healthfully? Sometimes, rarely, or never? Great. Thank you. I just want to remind everybody too, this is truly a self-awareness poll, so don't really compare yours. It's interesting to see how you compare it to others, but this truly is about ourselves, isn't it? All right, next question on physical health. How often do you exercise? Do you exercise at least 30 minutes 5 times a week? Uh-uh. I see a lot of rarely coming up. All right. Thank you. Next question. Let's talk about sleep. Answering the question, about sleeping 7 to 9 hours per night? Okay. Thank you. Next question. How about this one? Schedule regular preventative healthcare appointments. Okay. Thank you. How about this one? Take time off when ill. All right. 2 more. Get massages or some other kind of body work. A lot of are you kiddings on that one. All right, last one for this group. Do enjoyable physical work. All right. Thank you. So that gives a little bit of insight. Hopefully, we'll have some other dimensions of self-care coming up shortly. All right. So moving on, I just want to hold on just a minute. I've got to get this. I wonder, what do you think the perfect professional caregiver looks like? How many in here want to be the perfect caregiver? Anybody else other than me? I want to be the perfect caregiver. Well, do you know what that person looks like? You had suspense here. There she or he is, right? The go everywhere at once skates. You got to be the hand holder. You got to document. You got to have fiscal responsibility. You got to be a resource manager. You got to answer the phone. You got to have toothpicks. Don't you love that for sleepy eyes? You don't get that 7 to 9 hours of sleep, right? You have to have a big heart. You have to be the perpetual optimist for your patients. Government regulation assured, the med dispenser, insurance compliance assured. Keep the environment always peaceful and on an even keel at all costs. Answer your boss again, and document. Wow. Does this look like anybody else's life other than mine when I was working in that arena full time? Well, many of you may be familiar with the research that Dale Larson has done studying burnout, compassion fatigue, and secondary stress in caregivers. Now, the research results has led Dr. Larson to define caregiver distress as this: becoming demoralized from wanting to do good work, but not able to. He says that this leads to frustration and decreased caring. Now, I want you to think about the impact of the pandemic on healthcare workers like yourselves. The heartbreak of not being able to care for patients in the ways that they need has caused many caregivers to feel anxious, alone, and frustrated. I have heard heartbreaking stories from healthcare professionals who've had to watch as patients had to have surgery alone, had to go through rehab alone, had to die alone. And this ongoing heartbreak has broken many caring professionals as they've had to sit back and watch helplessly. This kind of unmourned loss and hurt deadens the spirit of healthcare professionals, and many have left the profession because of it. We are still suffering the aftermath of that. Think about all the stress of all the competing interests that pull you in different directions. You know, we have demands from our family, our employer, from insurance companies, from government regulations, and the pandemic magnified all of those demands. Our current healthcare system is a fractured system, and caregivers, both personal and professional, get caught in the middle. And that can leave the caregiver soul bankrupt, unable to deliver the care that the patient needs and that the caregiver wants to provide. And that is the definition of compassion fatigue or secondary traumatic stress. Now, instead of summoning the courage to reunite with scattered pieces of ourselves, we often just buckle down, try to work harder, faster, and more furiously. And that may work for a little while, but it doesn't work over time. because we are human beings, and human beings have limitations. But if you're like me, you sometimes forget that and think you can be all things to all people at all times. I mean, do you ever find yourself saying, I don't take lunch, I just snack on my break. I stay over until everything gets done, which is almost every day. And sometimes we become so proud of our self-sacrifice that we become critical of others who don't skip their breaks or those people who do go home on time. But these are not things to be proud of. Martyrs and enablers are not heroes. It takes honesty, courage, and humility to let yourself be vulnerable, to be human with needs of your own, to ask for help, and to make mistakes. The occupational healthcare literature cites secondary traumatic stress as an occupational health hazard. And if we have the courage to be honest with ourselves, then we have to realize that organizations have a duty to assess, respond, and prevent secondary traumatic stress. And to fail to do so is unethical. In fact, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said that she thought that every hospital unit should have a scream room for their staff, essentially to prevent secondary traumatic stress. Staff need a place to release the stress and trauma that they witness. Now, helping, fixing, and serving represent three different ways of seeing life. And Rachel Naomi Reman says that it's a matter of perspective. She says this: when you help, you see life as weak. When you fix, you see life as broken. When you serve, you see life as whole. She says that fixing and helping may be the work of the ego, and service, the work of the soul. Now, which one of these perspectives is your perspective? If you become aware, you might discover that you might adopt all three. In other words, in certain situations or with certain people, you tend to help. In others, you tend to fix. And still others, you move into serving. And as Riemann defines service, when we can serve rather than help or fix, then we are dwelling from our soul rather than our ego. All right, we're going to take the next section of a set of questions that Elnick has for us about self-care. So let's see how you answer this set of questions. What's your frequency of reading a good novel or other non-work related literature? Okay, good. All right, thank you. How about writing in a journal? You. How about this one? Develop or maintain a hobby. Make time for self-reflection. All right, thank you. Next is seek the services of a counselor or a therapist. All right. Spend time outdoors. Oh, all right. Say no to extra responsibilities when stressed out. Allow the gift of receiving instead of just giving.
All right. Now you might get so consumed with tending to the needs of your loved one or your patients that you forget how to take care of yourself. And over time, you might become separated from your own sense of self. You are at risk for developing a soul injury. A soul injury is a wound that separates you from your real self. Chronic caregiving can often do this. Self-neglect creeps in gradually, and over time, you lose touch with your real self. Now, your real self includes the totality of who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. The real self includes your shadow, where you unconsciously stuff parts of yourself that you don't want to face or that you don't like. The real self includes facades, facades that you use to hide behind. Now, facades are not bad. You need facades, especially in untrustworthy environments. The problem occurs when you mistakenly think that your facade is your real self. So let's compare soul injury to secondary traumatic stress disorder so that you can detect the difference. Now, the literature used to call burnout compassion fatigue, but more recent literature calls it secondary traumatic stress disorder because the symptoms exhibit themselves the same as PTSD. Now, see if you can identify with how one physician we work with describes her distress and how that distress caused her to become separated from herself. I knew I had moved into burnout when I could no longer respond to the nurses calling for help with their patients. My compassion was gone. That's when I made a decision to seek a different job. Now there's the secondary traumatic stress disorder. Now listen to what she says next. I also had to summon the courage to rehome scattered pieces of myself that I had left behind. This physician was not only experiencing symptoms of secondary traumatic stress disorder, but because the distress caused her to become separated from her own sense of self, she also experienced a soul injury. Now, this is a book of poetry written by women who served in Vietnam and suffered PTSD because they witnessed trauma. They use poetry and the arts to recover. I want to read you one poem. Hello, David. My name is Dusty. I am your night nurse. I will hang more blood and give you something for your pain. I will stay with you, and I will touch your face. Yes, of course, I will write your mother and tell her you were brave. I will write your mother and tell her how much you loved her. I will write your mother and tell her to give your bratty kid sister a big kiss and a hug. I will stay with you, and I will hold your hand. I will stay with you and watch your life flow through my fingers into my soul. I will stay with you until you stay with me. Goodbye, David. My name is Dusty. I am the last person you will see. I am the last person you will touch. I am the last person who will love you. So long, David. My name is Dusty. David, who will give me something for my pain? So we chose this poem for the last few lines. I am the last person you will see. I am the last person you will touch. Many of you work in geriatrics or other healthcare settings and hospice where you are the last person a patient sees and touches. That's an awesome responsibility that you hold in your hands. And that last line, who will give me something for my pain? If you work in hospice or a funeral home, the ER, ICU, nursing home, or do trauma counseling, you are surrounded by stress, death, pain, grieving families, families in shock, and angry families, and that impacts you. That causes the release of those stress chemicals. Stress chemicals put you on alert. They take you out of being grounded in your own body and often cause you to numb out and disconnect from yourself. So the question becomes, what do you do with your pain? Do you know what you do with your pain? And where does your pain go when you shut it down? Think about that for just a moment. This is an important question for you to be able to answer. Or is it your reality that you take care of one sick patient or grieving family or traumatized client and then go right on to the next and the next and the next? Because I contend that the distress is not so much about the loss, hurt, and grief that you're exposed to. It's that there's no time, no space, or method to release that loss, hurt, and grief. Now, you may not think that you experience many losses, but I can guarantee you that you do. But you probably numb those losses out so that you can keep going rather than learning how to mourn them. So when we do soul injury workshops with caregivers, we have them complete their loss inventory. And you see that up on your screen. And when people complete that inventory, they are shocked with the losses that they've incurred. And they also awaken to the ways in which they have numbed out and shut down from those losses. So again, we're going to return back to the poll. And so I'm going to bring up the next set of questions, and I'm going to ask you to answer those questions.
Stay in contact with important people. Often, sometimes, rarely, or are you kidding? Next question. Spend time with the people whose company is most comfortable. All right. Practice supportive self-talk. In other words, speak kindly in internal thought. Allow both tears and laughter to erupt spontaneously. How about this one? Play with children and animals. Identify comforting activities and seek them out. Okay, 2 more. Brag to a trusted friend or family member. Be proud of accomplishments. And express anger in a constructive way. Great. So as a caregiver, you may have become an expert on giving, but do you know how to receive? Are there some things you can do to increase your expertise in receiving so that you might even learn how to become a gracious receiver? Not always an easy thing to do, but it's not too late to learn. And it starts with self-compassion, which means developing the self-compassioning skill. Now, at Opus Peace, we use the term self-compassioning because we want to emphasize that self-compassion is not as much a thing, a noun, as it is a verb, something you do. It's a process. Now, self-compassioning begins when you allow yourself to feel whatever you feel, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. And that includes mourning the losses that you are experiencing. You know that famous saying, you can't heal what you don't feel. However, the chatter in our head often drowns out the whispers in our heart. And yet it's what's in our heart that awakens us to our real self. Now, to help us awaken to ourselves, every year on February 2nd, Opus Peace puts on a national public service event in which people all around the world stop for 3 minutes at 3 p.m. Eastern Time to pause, anchor their heart, and become fully present to themselves. It's a simple self-compassioning tool that can be used anywhere and at any time. And I'm going to show you how to do it right now. We're going to do it together. So it's very simple. So if you can, I'm going to ask you to simply lower your eyes or close them completely, whatever's most comfortable for you, so that you can turn away from the outside world for just a few minutes and focus just a little bit more on your interior work. And I want you to now take 3 deep breaths at your own pace. Just letting yourself relax just a little bit more with each breath. And now unfurl your brow, unclench your jaw. Imagine your neck and shoulders sort of melting away. Notice your heart beating quietly. And just quickly scan your body down to your feet. Notice how there might be a space in your feet that feels open and free, yet feels grounded and secure. Now take one more deep breath. Now relax the breath and just let your body breathe however it wants to. And I want you to place one or both hands firmly over your heart. Tenderly anchor your heart with your support and your strength. Pay attention to how your heart might be closed or numbed with fear of emotional pain. And just for this moment, let yourself get real with yourself, becoming fully present to whatever is there, the good, bad, the ugly. And if you discover hurt there, recognize that the hurt that you are feeling is real. It's part of your experience. The hurt is yours, but it's not you. It's not who you are. For just this moment, you can suspend your fear of pain and hurt by letting yourself be curious about how it's affecting you. You do not need to be afraid of who you are or who you are not. Now just be aware of this part of you that has been strong enough to hold this pain for you unconsciously. And breathe deeply this brave place inside you. And know that this too is a part of who you are. Pain and peace together without fear. And just bring this brave place with you as we continue on. Thank you. So I just want you to imagine 500 people around the globe simultaneously doing what we just did. Pausing for 3 minutes to create a reservoir of calm, cultivating community resonance. So that's what we're going to be doing on February 2nd. We will be doing that exercise at 3 p.m., but at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll be putting on a self-compassioning 1-hour webinar to discuss learning how to abide, reckon, and behold our real self. So that's coming up in just another week or so. So please tell your friends and colleagues about it. Many organizations are having their whole staff join in for this public service event. All right. Back to our poll. First question of this section. Make time for regular prayer, meditation, and reflection. Okay, thank you. How about this one? Seek community among friends, neighbors, or other gatherings. Okay. Cherish optimism and hope. Contribute to or participate in meaningful activities of choice. Be open to inspiration. Use ritual to celebrate milestones and to memorialize loved ones. Be aware of the non-tangibles of life. Listen to or create music.
Now, you are probably bearing many hardships, and to prevent hardships from turning into burdens requires forgiveness. As a caregiver, you might have a lot to forgive. You have to forgive yourself for not being perfect, which means you might let others down sometimes. It means letting yourself be human and make mistakes. If you're caring for traumatized clients, you may also have to forgive the world for having violence and trauma in it. You might have to forgive God for allowing the world to have war and trauma in it. You have to forgive the losses that you have sustained. You may have to forgive friends and family members for not understanding or helping you with the hardships of your job. You have to forgive your helplessness and loss of control with the parts of your life that you can't change. You have to forgive your body for getting tired and not being about to condense 48 hours of work into 12 hours, and lots more. And as you're able to participate in the forgiveness process, you become more grounded in truth rather than the illusion of how things should be. You learn how to cultivate the humility to ask for help and stop thinking that you could or should be able to do it all by yourself. And you let go of prideful thinking that tells you that you should be superhuman without any limitations. You accept that you're not perfect. And yes, you will make mistakes. And now Deborah is going to tell you how she handled one of the mistakes that she made.
Yeah, I was responding to a hospice consult in the hospital, and when I arrived on the unit, the nurse told me that the patient's wife did not want me to use the word hospice, and she didn't want me to see the patient unless she was present, and she had already gone home for the day. Now, I deal with these kinds of situations all the time, and so I considered the caution, but I went on in to see the patient. And he and I spoke at length about what he was experiencing, and he thanked me over and over again for the conversation we had. And yes, I used the word hospice and dying because I think it's unethical not to. And I told him that I'd come back the next day to meet with his wife. Well, I left his room, patting myself on the back for the good job that I had done. The next day, I come back. His wife is at bedside. She looks at my badge to see who I am, and then she orders me out of the room into the hallway. And she said, I gave strict orders that you were not to speak to my husband unless I was present. I don't ever want you to see my husband again. And I was banished from his care. Well, a few days later, the patient's condition deteriorated, and he was indeed transferred to our hospice unit. Now I had to acknowledge my mistake to my whole team and tell them why I wasn't going to be able to provide his care. Well, the patient died a few days later, and I thought that'd be the end of it, but it wasn't. A few months later, the patient's wife comes to the hospital's memorial service that we hold for all the veterans who had died in the previous few months. And I'm the host of that ceremony. So I take the microphone to welcome everyone, and who do I see in the fourth row of this packed auditorium? But the patient's wife. And she is sitting there glaring at me with her arms crossed. I wanted to disappear. But there was no denying that she wanted me dead. Now I can tell you that I panicked and I froze for a moment. And then I anchored my heart, took a deep breath, and I looked directly at her and I said, Mrs. Schmidt, I know I made a mistake in not listening to your desire for your husband. I realize that my action increased the suffering that you were already feeling. I just want you to know that I'm very sorry for having done that to you. Well, she hesitated for a moment, then she nodded her head and she uncrossed her arms. And I felt forgiven. So, what would happen if at some point you decided to change your relationship to the distress that you have sustained? That's going to involve forgiveness. However, I do want to say it's important to not forgive prematurely, because that ends up becoming a false forgiveness that doesn't really solve anything. For now, it's enough to simply start considering forgiveness, not only forgiving others, but to also learn how to forgive yourself. So I'm going to show you a 3-minute video that might help provide us with some clues for how to do it whenever the time might be right.
To my heart, what used to be so full of light has grown so dark. Shadows of resentment and all the hurts I've ever felt. I'm on my knees, I need some help. Give me strength, please help this dying heart to live. Grant me power, the power to forgive. What happened to the peace? I used to feel contentment deep inside of me. Now there's hate and anger eating at my soul. I've got to find a way to let it go. Give me strength, please help this dying heart to live. Grant me power, the power to forgive. I will not forget, but with forgiveness I just might find a way to let love in and heal my life. Give me strength, please help this dying heart to live. Grant me power, the power to forgive. Please help this dying heart to live. Grant me power, the power to forgive. Help me forgive.
Now, in November, we did 2 webinars with you about our newly released film called Dare to Forgive. It explores both forgiving others and asking others to forgive us, and also self-forgiveness. Now, there are several short case studies where people identify their guilt, and then there's a panel discussion about this issue. So these films make great in-services, not only for professional intervention, but also for an employee's personal growth. So to find out more information about those, you can certainly see our website. So we're going to do one last round of self-care questions now. So I'm going to bring the first question up for you.
Take time to eat lunch. Make time to address both the physical and emotional needs of patients, clients, residents. Take time to chat and laugh with coworkers. Seek regular supervision and mentoring. Set limits with patients, families, and colleagues. Find a project or a task that's exciting and rewarding in which to be involved. How about this one? Decrease time spent comparing work performance to others. Seek a support group, even if it's only one other person.
So I will leave you with these self-compassioning actions for you to consider doing. So give yourself permission to have needs. Your patient needs are important, and so are yours. Validate the toll that caregiving takes. Letting down your stoic front means that the part of you that is tired can receive some energy because you let go of denial and acknowledge the hardships it is carrying. You can then even thank the part of yourself for the load that it's carrying. Accept your limitations. You can't be everything to all people at all times. It's okay to say no, even to your patients. Although this may be difficult at first because you don't want to disappoint others, or you want to do everything possible to maximize your patient's quality of life. The reality is you have limits. Surprisingly, you will probably find that respecting your own limits will actually end up liberating you in small ways that have big rewards, both for you and for your patients. Ask for help. Now, this may strike a blow to your pride when it's subtly or not so subtly telling you that you are inadequate or incompetent if you can't do it all by yourself. Chronic illness and prolonged caregiving are humbling experiences. Let this be a time of cultivating humility. When others say, "Let me know if there's anything I can do to help," tell them what they can do and be specific. It is easy to become isolated, and this often occurs so insidiously that you don't even realize it until after you are cut off from relationships that have suffered a lack of attention. So reach out to people. Also think about faith-based community groups or exercise classes or retirement communities or book clubs. Reach out. People need other people. You need other people. Don't let caregiving squeeze you out of your own life. You may have allowed your life to gradually be stripped away from you. You may have barely even noticed that this has occurred. Your patients need you. You need you. Don't take you for granted by not having some hobbies or activities that feed your soul. Be willing to closely scrutinize ways that you can add little pleasures, even if it's just a 15-minute bubble bath that gives you comfort and provides something for you to look forward to. And even if things don't go well, this isn't a signal to not do self-care. It's a signal to brainstorm. Brainstorm other solutions that can include your patients and your needs. Behold yes moments. Maybe it's playing with the grandkids or the roses in your garden or a good hamburger. But taking a moment to open your heart and let yourself behold goodness keeps you connected with your soul. Remember to anchor your heart. When your heart is breaking, anchor it. When your heart is rejoicing, anchor it through the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. Let yourself experience all of it. So we've given you some ideas to consider, but they're just ideas. Only you can know which ideas fit you and which ones don't. But you wouldn't be here today if you weren't ready to make some adjustments. So ask yourself these caregiving questions. In what ways is caregiving squeezing you out of your own life? How hard is it for your pride to let you ask for help? What are some small things that you can do differently that will help bring more you back into your life? And what is keeping you from moving forward to do those things? And lastly, I know that we've only touched the tip of the iceberg, but I want you to know that we have lots of resources for you to take advantage of. Masterpiece is our online learning program with a comprehensive course on self-compassioning. We have another one on caregiver distress, as well as several holistic tools. Those courses provide you with a process for accessing the grace of your being. And we hope that you'll take steps to move forward to that end so that you can bring more you into your personal and your professional life. You can access our Masterpiece online learning through our website, and there's more information on the website, and know that the first lesson of every course is free, so you can go in and explore those. We also want you to know that we have a 4-day training, our Soul Injury Virtual Institute, that culminates in providing you with a jump drive that has 16 presentations that you can use to facilitate your own in-services on self-compassioning and also on 15 other related topics. So our next institute is in April. There's information on our website, and I'll send information out with the follow-up email so that you can access how to take part in that training if you so choose. And lastly, just the Opus Peace vision and mission. Our vision is a world where people know how to personally apply these 3 statements. Cultivate in me the willingness to re-own, rehome, and revitalize scattered pieces of myself so wholeness can be restored. Grow in me the honesty, courage, and humility to release my fear of who I am and who I am not. Fuel me with your grace. And our Opus Peace mission is to provide a meaningful experience through soul injury educational programs that help people learn how to heal the relationship that they have with themselves. So thank you so much for your time. At this time, we will take questions. I know that Tori put in the chat that you can use the Q&A feature. And Tori, I'll just ask you if any questions have come in, if you can just let us know what they are.
And also, please feel free to put in the chat box. It would be great for us at Opus Peace to see any self-revelations that this presentation or the self-awareness polling questions may have had with you. We'd appreciate that kind of feedback as well in the chat.
Yeah, well, thank you both so much. This was wonderful. I already saw we have a couple questions coming through. So we have Jennifer asking, how can we lovingly challenge people to not numb and escape, but rather engage when when the former is their MO?
Well, I think it really begins with looking at our fear of feeling emotional pain. I mean, that's really where it starts. That's why we use numbing agents to escape, right? It's because we don't want to feel what is real. I mean, life hurts. No, and people in hospice for sure know that life hurts. Letting go hurts. Loss hurts. So to answer that question, honestly, it really starts with us developing the honesty and the courage to look at our fear of feeling emotional pain. And what we might discover then is that our fear of feeling it is actually worse than if we just let ourselves be real to feel. So that's why that anchoring your heart tool, I mean, is just so powerful. I can't tell you. I mean, as I said, we will be doing this on February 2nd. You know, last year we had more than 400 people with us, and we've had like 800 every month rewatch the video. So, and it really starts there, something this simple as far as just getting real with what is, instead of trying to pretend or positive think, get away, or put on rose-colored glasses that says, I'm not going to feel it. I'm only going to look on this end of the spectrum. Life is a full spectrum. So we've got to stop being afraid of it. So that's where I would say it starts, Jennifer. Thank you for asking that question, Jennifer.
And thank you for that response. Lots of questions coming in. Skitch asks, what is the other name for psychic numbing?
Emotional anesthesia is what the DSM would say.
All right. And we also have a question from Skitch again saying, what was the second way people acquire PTSD? He says he knows about direct exposure and secondary trauma, but wondering what the other way was.
Direct exposure. It's also just hearing about someone that's close to you, just hearing about their trauma. Also, I think there's, you know, when you think of watching, even just watching the news, being bombarded with victims over and over and over again, we also know that that impacts the brain as well. Yeah, but that's that's the first, what you're asking about sketch. Go online and look up the DSM, because that's the first criteria, is those categories, and it explains it quite well. And that's easily available online. You can go online and look those up.
Wonderful. And Cherie is just asking if we can share any dates or cost or time around the Opus Institute.
So the next Opus Peace Virtual Institute is April 22nd through the 25th. And I will send out information about the cost and how to access that in the follow-up email. The cost is $875, but I will tell you that on February 2nd, for those that are attending our February 2nd event, we'll be offering a discounted price for anyone who signs up for the April Institute. We do hold the Institute twice a year, so it's always in April and October.
And I think the real value of the Institute is that at the end, as I said, we will give you a jump drive, an external drive with 16 different presentations on it that you can go out and do your own. It's like a, plug and play type thing, that it's designed specifically to show a video, much like what you saw today, only just in a shortened 15-minute version of whatever the topic is. 16 different topics, and then you can facilitate a discussion. And I will tell you, it opens doors to helping people get real with themselves, helping people to stop being fearful of emotional pain and just getting real with whatever is. So at any rate, to me, that's the real value of the Institute. Yes, you will get profound personal growth and professional skills set accented. But the more important thing to me, I think, from what we've heard, it's that jump drive at the end that allows you to go forth and carry the message. And that's our hope, is that the soul injury message will go forth, because it's a fairly simple message, not easy to do always, but it is fairly straightforward.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. And we also have Amanda just kind of sharing a takeaway I'll read aloud for everyone. So she says, I want to thank the work of everyone at Opus Peace. Just the other morning, I had a moment just before getting up and starting my day of simply crippling self-doubt. I took a few moments to anchor my heart and not try to analyze or think my way through it, but allowing my feelings to be what they are. And as my feelings were given the space they needed, they were not numbed, but rather very prevalent, and I was able to ease the doubt and had a very meaningful day. Thank you so much for all of your tools, your programs, for simply being you.
Oh, wow. Amanda, you just made my day. She could not have made the point of why we are doing this work of Opus Peace the way we are. Because when you think that she woke up with self-doubt, what does everybody try to do? They would try to tell Amanda, oh, you shouldn't have any self-doubt. Look at all the great things you've done. Oh, blah, 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 blah. They would have tried to talk her out of what was real for her. And see, the other paradoxical thing that she said at the end was letting herself feel her self-doubt, feel her inadequacy. See, it was there in her unconscious. It was there in her body. All she did was develop the courage to get honest with herself and say, oh, this is real. Okay. And ironically, that made her stronger, because she was willing to be real and stand in her truth, abide with her truth. That's the power of self-compassion. That's what Amanda, you did. Thank you, Amanda. I will not forget your story. It inspires me and motivates me to continue to do this work.
It looks like that was all the questions. Just have some more people expressing their appreciation, feeling like pieces were put together with some of the information Deborah shared. We have a recommendation for the Leadership Institute. Ginger says she highly, highly recommends. So lots of just support and comments in here as well.
No, that must be Ginger Cooley in Colorado, would be my guess. Or Ginger Veal in Oklahoma could have been her too. I can't see the chat.
All right, so as we wrap up, just another reminder, of course, that the presentation recording will be posted on the We Honor Veterans website, and Angie will be following up regarding CEUs as well.
Well, I thank you, Catherine and Tori, both for valuing the work that Opus Peace is doing, recognizing how our 10,000 veterans who have died and gone on their way have left a legacy about soul injury, and how we can open up to heal the relationship that we have with ourselves, because that's often what happens. That is the opportunity on people's deathbeds, and including traumatized people. And so we are very, very thankful to those veterans. We're thankful for all of you who are taking care of dying patients and infirm patients or whoever, and your own family members. Caregiving is not, we started out by saying, caregiving is not easy. Don't underestimate the difficulty and the heart and the courage that it takes for you to do your work. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Angie Snyder. Couldn't
And
do this work
Angie as
without
well.
her,
Yes.
our fearless leader.
We all know Opus Peace would not be Opus Peace without Angie as well.
That is absolutely nothing truer could be said.
Always honored and a pleasure to have you both. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Hope to
you.
see everybody February 2nd.
Yes, don't
It's all
forget, February
free.
2nd.
Come. Bring all your friends and colleagues. So anything, are we offline?
I'm just about to end it now.
Okay.